cada vez pior. Paga no governo, aí eu
trilha de dos postos. Mas essa versão não, porque é mais ou menos a mesma coisa que nós vimos na
a história resumida. São Francisco fala sobre o Vale do São Francisco, as barragens. A história de Itaparica, no caso, trata só de Itaparica. A história.
Não, vai ficar congelado.
Então, a oficina do Vale trata da história de desenvolvimento do governo de todo o Vale do São Francisco. O outro livro trata da história do Polo Sindical, a questão da barragem de Itaparica, os problemas sociais causados com a inundação de Itaparica. São os central ser elétrico e a gente quer que os empréstimos do setor elétrico seja bem visto, pelos programas que causam a construção da hidrelétrica, que acaba gerando energia, mas criando um sério problema para a sociedade e que muitas vezes o empréstimo conseguidos com fins do governo acaba, ao invés de gerar uma grande riqueza, acaba causando aqui um prejuízo para a população.
Mulheres têm problemas com misturar a comunidade e cultura.
gotten his permission, but yes.
We're going into building just on the left.
Okay.
Anyway, he's a good guy, like, real nice. We disagree, I'm going to speak out to say, time, I said, but it's good to me that he just doesn't get it right.
This is Leda. This is Vicente. This is Trisha Phoebe. Hi. Come on. This is Amani who's just helping me make a film. Come on. I'm going to leave you actually because I'm going to go back to one. Okay.
in Los Angeles.
Oh, you're... True, thanks. Thanks a lot for meeting these guys.
Well, it's my pleasure.
Yeah. Practice my Portuguese. Mine's hopeless. They've been struggling with this.
Você quer café?
Tchau.
Quer café? Quer água?
Vamos mañana.
Excellent.
You're welcome to Java.
Bye bye.
Dia só? Itaparica, a ilha? É aí pertinho da ilha, Itaparica. Qual Itaparica? Eu morei em Valença.
Itaparica, ilha de Salvador. Essa Itaparica que a gente está falando é uma cachoeira do Rio São Francisco.
Ah, lá no interior mesmo. Bem no
Here in Washington, D.C. to meet the World Bank because they are presidents of unions that are within a regional federation that is struggling to get a resettlement project fully implemented. What happened is an enormous dam was built on the Itaparica River and 65,000 people were moved out of the area that was flooded when this dam was built. This video shows how they organised to demand a serious resettlement project, to get land, to get irrigation and so on. It also shows how, while initial demands were complied with, the hydroelectric company has just stopped implementing their programme, despite the fact that they've received 2 loans from the World Bank to do it with. So what we'll do is we'll start with a video which will give you a good sense of the background, and then Leda and Vicente will fill us in on what's been going on since the point at which this ends, which is actually last year, and a little bit about their meetings at the World Bank. They had one yesterday and another one today, so they're right out of it. Is it working?
Yeah.
Oh, I should also introduce, we've had lunch. There's Patricia Feely from Oxfam in England, who's bringing from here, and this is Renato Matias, who is from Oxfam in Recife.
No.
Okay.
The dam is actually on the South Francisco River.
Oh, sorry.
It's all right.
Just called it.
A segunda maior barragem do mundo vai proporcionar a geração de 2.500.000 barras. Não é fácil fazer em um ano. E isso é o que foi feito. Está sendo feito e aí tem vários problemas nas agrovinas. E a gente não quer que os agricultores fiquem nas áreas 2, 3 anos sem trabalhar, sem produzir. Porque é ruim para eles, é ruim para a região e é ruim para toda a nação. De nada, né? Mas os outros estão levando, pode ser que depois a gente readquira. Se perdendo, isto é, à vontade aí, a gente vai perder isso tudo novamente.
Irrigation to reach their plots of land. They're still waiting.
How are they living?
They've got small maintenance payments that are paid on a monthly basis, the equivalent of 2 minimum salaries, so about $120. But it's given without any sort of distinction to families, no matter what size you've got. So sometimes it's 8 people, sometimes it's 2. But they, they weren't too worried at the time they made that agreement because they thought it was just 9 months.
Yeah. This is a big one.
They got fed up of just not getting anywhere, and so they occupied the Itaparica dam site.
Se tivesse água, a gente estava todo mundo, ninguém dormia não, porque a pagamento era trabalhar para ter para a gente, e quando Deus me tirar, eu deixar para o filho. Filho meu que está agora, que estava dedicado a Mateus, se eu tivesse migrado aqui, ele não teria saído. Ele estava dedicado a aprender comigo, porque foi bem do.
What you're doing here, and then Vicente and Leda will each talk about the meetings at the bank.
We've been having negotiations with various bank missions over the years since their people first resettled, to sort of try and keep the project moving along. And all the time, the Polo Sindical people and Oxfam and others have been assured that there were some temporary hiccups here and there, but basically the project was still on course. But each year there's been one problem or another, constant stoppages of the construction works for the irrigation projects and the canals, and an evident reluctance on the part of the regional power company to push ahead with the resettlement. Instead of using their funds to complete the Itaparica project, Shesvi has been busy building a new dam further downstream, one that's actually much more economically viable, much less socially and environmentally damaging, called Shingo. But clearly any money that they had spare over these past few years has been put into Shingo and not directed towards the resettlement project. We can't prove that money the World Bank put up has been diverted to Shingo, but there's certainly huge cost overruns in the Itaparica project. So last year, when they realized that the World Bank actually suspended the loan temporarily in, I think, 1990 for about a few months. But the World Bank's aware that if they pull out, then the whole project collapses. These people have no possibility of being resettled through the goodwill of the Brazilian government. And so they came back on board. There was some sort of work started again, began to pick up. But then again, the whole thing fell apart when the counterpart funding, which is the main sticking point, stopped going through to the power company. So contractors weren't paid, so work stopped. And that's when the second occupation of the dam site occurred in June of last year. And following that, Vicente and Leda will tell you what's happened to the situation. Has got much worse, first in the form of actual repression by the police, manipulated by Shesvi, and now the economic financial situation of the power company, the whole power sector in Brazil, puts the whole project in doubt again.
Nesse vídeo vocês viram um pouco da história desses anos de 76 para cá. A gente vai complementar informando depois desse vídeo, agora a partir do final do ano passado.
You've only seen a little part of our struggle, our long struggle over all these years through seeing this video. So I'm going to now add a few more details about what we've been going through.
A partir do final do ano passado, quando a Chesf anunciava o cronograma de montagem definitiva do projeto de irrigação para o final de 92, quando deu início, as empreiteiras iniciou a montar vários projetos, a Chesf inicia fazendo uma grande pressão polícias nas agrovilas, inclusive prendendo até dirigentes sindicais, reuniões com o Polo Sindical e Chesf também sendo vigiada por policiais, sendo tomado fotografias, gravadores.
From the end of last year, when the schedule we were given for the completion of the installation of the irrigation works was supposed to be the end of '92, and the contractors had started working again, began to fall victim to a lot of police intimidation and harassment and problems with the power company. There were raids on a number of the settlement sites. The meetings of the union were under police surveillance. They even seized some of the documents, tapes and notes made during meetings by the union lawyer.
Uma contradição, né? Porque parecendo que tudo estava andando bem e a chefe fazendo muita pressão, significava que alguma coisa por trás havia. Quando ela anunciava o reinício e estava acontecendo da montagem das obras, anunciava também que os acertos entre o governo brasileiro e o Banco Mundial para a entrada dos 100 milhões de dólares, tudo estava indo bem. Por outro lado, pressionando a gente, os trabalhadores reassentados, como que estava, é claro, sabendo de tudo que estava ocorrendo, tentando preparar a gente, isto é, amedrontar os reassentados para quando conhecesse a verdadeira verdade da situação, como por exemplo, nenhum acerto a chefe do governo vinha cumprindo, não havia entrado 100 milhões, consequentemente iria haver a parada da montagem das obras, como está ocorrendo. A pressão continua, estamos informados de que ontem, por falta de cumprimento dos acordos que a chefe vem fazendo com a gente, como exemplo, a verba de manutenção temporária, que haveria de pagar um determinado valor, está pagando muito menos. Ontem os trabalhadores dos municípios afetados decidiram, pela falta da quantidade certa do que havia sido acordado do pagamento, decidiram ocupar a sede dos bancos, o Banco do Brasil, que é quem efetua o pagamento da verba de manutenção temporária dos reassentados.
Seemed to be a kind of contradiction. On one hand, we were being told that everything was going smoothly, at the same time we were under increasing pressure and repression from Chesney, and we felt something was happening between our company and the bank. Nevertheless, the bank had agreed to put up a supplementary loan of $100 million to complete the irrigation work, but we knew that the Chesney continually was breaking its contractual agreement with the bank. One example of this is the fact that although it was agreed in '86 that we would receive the equivalent of 2 minimum salaries per month per family, Chesney was always paying us less than this. The situation now is such that yesterday the maintenance payments have been suspended because of Chesney not having any ready cash, and in desperation some of the families in a number of the towns have occupied the bank branches of the Bank of Brazil until they receive payment. They're not going to them clean. So there's a lot of tension in the area right now.
Então o entrave realmente que a gente sempre, depois das conversas aqui, e que lá a gente já percebia, exatamente o não cumprimento dos acordos que o governo brasileiro, através do setor elétrico, faz com o Banco Mundial, já que o Banco Mundial condiciona a entrada dos 100 milhões de dólares a também colocar à disposição da contrapartida nacional, e que a gente, tanto lá no Brasil como aqui, a gente está conversando sobre isso. Realmente a não liberação da contrapartida nacional vem sendo um entrave da entrada dos 100 milhões para que as empresas possam dar continuidade à montagem do projeto. Aqui então a gente está conversando, vendo, fazendo ver ao banco que use também de alguma forma uma maneira com que o governo brasileiro se sinta um tanto pressionado, com a finalidade de dar prioridade à conclusão do projeto de reassentamento de Itaparica, ao invés de estar cuidando de outras obras, como é o caso de Xingó.
So the failure of the Brazilian government to fulfill its contractual part of the bargain with the conditioning of the second loan for World Bank is putting the whole project in jeopardy. That Brazilians continually fail to come up with counterpart funding. This means that the second loan has not been released, although we understood from our talks in the bank yesterday that they're prepared to begin to release some of the new loan in order to prevent the demobilisation of the workforce, because if that happens, it could throw the whole schedule back by not just months, but even more years. So the reason we came and had talks with the bank was to try and push them to find a way of pressurising the Brazilian government to regard the Itaparica project as a priority, and the conclusion of the Itaparica project as a priority, and to get them to concentrate on that instead of initiating newer projects like the Shingle Dam.
Então, o que a gente quer é que realmente o projeto seja concluído, que o governo brasileiro, através de algumas pressões, possa considerar a conclusão prioridade, porque 4 anos após a mudança, a desocupação, se viu aqui no vídeo quando se falou que não poderíamos ficar 2, 3 anos parados, já estamos com muito mais, 4 anos, já indo para os 5 anos, e a incerteza continua, não sabemos quando será concluído. Sabe-se que tem o recurso do Banco Mundial à disposição, por falta da contrapartida nacional, é que as obras estão lá sendo paralisadas e que deixa muita incerteza, e o que realmente vai acontecer entre a população que há muito tempo está parada, vivendo com a ajuda de manutenção temporária, a gente não sabe o que pode ocorrer. A gente pede, inclusive, entidades que possam interferir junto ao Banco Mundial, até junto ao próprio governo brasileiro, possa nos ajudar com a finalidade de a gente chegar à conclusão do projeto de reassentamento, montagem do projeto de irrigação o mais breve possível.
So we just want to get this project finished, and we want help from all of you to achieve that end. It's been 4 years since we were moved from our original homes, and as you saw in the film, somebody already saying at the time of the move that to remain sort of idle for 2 or 3 years would be intolerable for people used to working on the land, and yet it's been much longer already. The other factor that's weighing very heavily on us is the continual uncertainty. Are we just going to lose everything, or is the project going to be concluded? We can't carry on this way, and we're uncertain about how the people will eventually react, because they've been pushed so far. We really can't say what's going to happen now.
Esclarecendo o finalzinho, não sei se estão... Queria mais ou por aí?
Acho que
mais tem que discutir.
Claro, acho que seria bom entrar no diálogo com o pessoal e se tem perguntas não específicas.
Have you met with the World Bank yet?
Yeah, we met yesterday.
How did that go? What? You'll tell us.
Shall I? We met with the Director of Operations for Venezuela.
Who was that?
Shosky.
Oh, Trotsky, yeah.
And the Phyllis Pomerantz, who's head of agricultural, the agricultural division, and Dan Gross, task manager, and that was all on their side. They had kept out environment people. They'd shown interest, indicated they wanted to be part of the meeting.
And they kept out the environment.
So the meeting was a bit of a disappointment, in that the bank's position is that they have very little leverage with the Brazilian government, that it would be unfair to condition the completion of the Itaparica project with any other loan that's in the pipeline, that it would, because it might damage the interests of other poor people in Brazil. And we obviously wouldn't want that. They did undertake, Chosky did undertake to raise it with the Minister of Infrastructure. I mean, he suggested that Leda and Vicente, instead of being in Washington, should be having talks with the Ministry of Infrastructure. And they pointed out that they can't actually even talk to the local power company at the moment, given the state of affairs. It's much less, feasible for them to go all the way to Brasilia and be received by a minister. I mean, he then said he would try and facilitate that meeting. And they're trying to sort of lower the temperature between the power company and the leaders of Polo Sindical. It's quite clear. I mean, the only thing that seemed to touch Jocelyn was when he was saying that it's not just the Itaparica project, it's not just this group of people are directly affected, but it is the whole credibility of the bank's ability to enforce its own resettlement policies, which everybody can admire on paper, but we've yet to see a case where it's been successfully implemented. And when I mentioned that we knew that while Itaparica might not be highest item in the news at the moment, certainly people were looking at it, particularly in the context of the independent review that's currently in India looking at the Normandy resettlement project, and they're due to report in March. And I think, and certainly people in those states in India who are unhappy about accepting the resettlement package will not feel encouraged to accept the resettlement package if they see what's happening to people in Itaparica. And
How do you rate that?
He looked quite sort of worried. And it's quite clear he'd been talking rather blithely initially about, well, the bank has only got two mechanisms for dealing with situations like this when a country is refusing to meet the terms of the agreement. We either suspend the loan or we cancel it, cancel the whole project. So, obviously, he said, but of course we don't really want to do that in this instance. But I think it's very unlikely that they'll do that. They've obviously got to sort this out. But what we fear is that if it's just left to the Brazil operations people, they'll just keep nudging Chesty along, and when they've got a little bit of surplus cash, a little bit more will happen in Itaparica, but there's no priority. They said, the Brazilian government's been quite frank in their dealings with us, and they've said that Xingu, the other dam, is our priority, Itaparica isn't. So that's isto era mais ou menos, né? Sim, que falou.
What is the assumed reason or the alleged reason, alleged by Chesapeake, why it hasn't upheld its part of the bargain?
Lack of funds.
And they are saying that we haven't done it
because we don't have the money.
Did they have the money?
They have had money at different stages of this project. At the moment, I think it's true to say they don't have the money. They've even stopped the work on Xingu. Both the Chesty account and the central power company, Eletrobras, which is the main partner in this deal, their accounts have been frozen by the Brazilian Central Bank because they're in arrears for the World Bank. That happened a few days ago. So there is a liquidity problem at the moment, but that's a sort of a temporary thing. What's the real problem is there is no political will on the part of Brazilians to push this project through, and they don't see that until it goes higher up the political profile, it's just not going to happen.
Who from the was it the Environment Department or a regional environmental unit from Latin America went to attend?
I can't say. I mean, I just told off the record. Well, not just in passing. I don't know if they formally requested this.
Yeah. Was it the Central Department or the environmental unit in the region?
The Latin American, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know whether they were expecting to be invited and were surprised when it didn't happen.
I have some questions about where we stand right now. I don't know very much about dams and electricity, but I would imagine that the installation, ideally, the installation of irrigation infrastructure would coincide with dam construction and completion, and that once or very shortly after the basin is filled up, then irrigation should begin to take place, and of course resettlement before then. So we've got a dam that's not finished. We've got an area that's not flooded.
Oh no, we've got
the dam is
Itaparica's been finished.
It's finished and flooded.
And flooded.
So it is producing.
So it's producing such energy as it's capable of.
All right. So what we're talking about is money, counterpart money, basically for the installation of irrigation infrastructure. Is there still resettlement to be done?
No, the resettlement's done? I mean, there's some problems.
People are living in these houses, but do they have plots that have been...
The plots will only be demarcated once the irrigation is on the stream. There are a few, some have been demarcated. Né? Você quer falar? Porque são os pontos mais técnicos sobre...
Quando o governo brasileiro apresentou ao banco o projeto de reassentamento, que obteve aprovação rápida, que obteve o financiamento, 132 milhões de dólares, a verdade não foi entregue todos os 132, porque o banco estava fiscalizando e sentia que o andamento das obras não era proporcional à entrada do dinheiro no Brasil, e aí bloqueou uma parte, né? Mas a verdade é que o recurso inicial que o governo brasileiro, o setor elétrico, a CHESF, recebeu para montar o projeto até julho de 88, isto é, ainda estava inundando, quando acabasse de encher o lago era para começar a irrigação. E esse foi o acerto primeiro que a CHESF, o governo brasileiro, fez com o Banco Mundial. A CHESF não cumpriu, e daí para cá que tantos e tantos outros programam lá, não cumpre nenhum, porque o governo brasileiro não cumpre com o que acerta com o Banco Mundial, não coloca à disposição a contrapartida nacional, que o primeiro recurso, o banco não condicionou a entrada da contrapartida. Como o governo acabou o dinheiro e não fez o projeto, o banco examinou, viu que era necessário mais recursos, realmente era, aprovou mais esses 100 milhões. Como agora ele não entrega simplesmente por entregar os 100 milhões, quer que o governo coloque também a parte do dinheiro nacional à disposição. Como o governo brasileiro não coloca, também não está entrando os 100 milhões de dólares. Não, acerto inicial, em que pese a gente não ter acesso aos acertos que eles fizeram lá, mas realmente a inundação terminou mais ou menos em maio, junho, e em julho de 88. Sim. Então, 1 mês, 2 meses após o vencimento, o acerto inicial era para o projeto começar a funcionar. E até hoje não está funcionando. Sim, as terras, a gente pode dizer que a maioria está demarcada. O trabalhador, a grande maioria já recebeu o lote, já sabe onde esse lote está marcadinho lá, né?
Quantos hectares?
Varia, tem uma parte que é para ser irrigada, a outra, um outro complemento que a gente chama de sequeiro, que vai ser mais fora. Foi selecionado as áreas melhores para irrigar, né? Que o lote vai variar, o lote irrigado, de acordo com a força de trabalho familiar que tem a família, em 1,5 hectare, 3, 4,5 e 6 hectares irrigados, né? Tem essa variação. Então quase todos os projetos, porque tem um projeto lá do município de Glória que não tem financiamento do Banco Mundial. Esse projeto está muito atrasado, os outros que tem estão nessa situação. Esse não tem nada demarcado, mas os outros, os chamados bordas do lago especiais, todos os lotes estão demarcados e quase tudo desmatado, só falta mesmo montar. E quase todo o material está lá estocado.
So that everybody, just quick, Vicente gave some more sort of details on the counterpart arrangements. I mean, the first loan was sort of provided as soon as the dam itself was completed. That wasn't financed by the World Bank, and they came in to make the resettlement project workable, and they put up the money straight away so that Chesney could get on with the irrigation and the resettlement quickly, and didn't insist on the counterpart funds being put down on the table. But with the second loan, given the high cost overruns, there was a sticking point, and they did insist that the Brazilians put some money forward, and that still continues to be a problem. And then on the question of the land, a lot of the land has been demarcated. There are one or two areas where they're further behind schedule, and that work hasn't done. And the plots vary from in size depending on the size of the family labour force, and it's sort of between 1 and 6 hectares of irrigated land. One of the sort of environmental consequences of everybody thinking that this was going to be 9 months and then you'd be growing your crops, the families were paid a small amount of money to start clearing the plots. They're in this sort of semi-arid zone called Caatinga, where you have these thorny bushes. That's the only thing that grows without irrigation now. And so they set about clearing that land, thinking that very soon you'd be planting. But of course it's remained exposed without any kind of cover for 4 years, and of course eroding very, very, very seriously.
Is this on both sides of the river in Bahia and Pernambuco? Did the governors considered sort of left-wing, like Valdir Pires and Miguel Arraes, did they assist the people at all?
Eles foram eleitos em 86, né? Isso, 86, 4 anos. 4 anos, não, 76.
Ele foi 86. 76 era...
No tempo de que Valdir Pires, pelo lado da Bahia, Miguel Arraes, do lado de Pernambuco, eram governadores, no mínimo a gente tinha fácil acesso até eles para conversar, mas que nada faziam, nada podiam fazer, que dependia, é claro, de recursos federais, que os estados não tinham nada. Inclusive aí no vídeo, como eu disse aí numa parte aí, que os governos estaduais entrassem em campo, né? Governo federal, os governos estaduais nunca fizeram nada. E hoje a verdade é que os governos atuais, Antônio Carlos Magalhães do lado da Bahia, Joaquim Francisco do lado de Pernambuco, é a combinação deles dois, juntamente com o presidente da República e chefes, para fazer a pressão em cima da gente, pra gente se calar. É isso que há atualmente.
The short answer is no. I mean, although in the time of Valdir and Arraes, both with a certain left-wing reputation, they had access to talk to the government, they never, in fact, ever took the issue up. And I think that's quite notable, that in states as poor and as needy as these two, that was never regarded as a regional priority, and I think it reflects who the beneficiaries of this project are going to be. And with the present governors of the two states, they're much more right-wing, have links to family, the presidential family, and they believe are instrumental, certainly supporting the type of repression that they've been suffering in the last few months.
Patrícia, deixa eu falar só, né? No momento que estava se dando o fechamento da barragem, né, que o Polo Sindical estava recorrendo para que não fosse feito deste do lago naquele momento, porque tinha muitos problemas ainda nas áreas para resolver, né, está recorrendo a entidades do meio ambiente, né, a outras entidades, e Valdir Pires, né, teve em Rodelas, né, nesse momento que ele estava fazendo uma articulação, no mesmo dia que ele estava fazendo essa articulação, que estava na barragem, fazendo uma, né, para não fechar, ele esteve em Rodelas e disse, o que ele disse para a população foi o seguinte: sinto muito, mas não posso fazer nada.
Comprovando o que eu entendi. E teve mais um complicador.
This has been the case with all everybody's sort of washing their hands of this. You know, the World Bank can't do anything, the state governments can't do anything, Chelsea can't do anything. Somebody's got to do something.
How much of World Bank money is frozen, and how much is the World Bank requiring in terms of counterpart funds? What percentage at this point?
There's no real frozen money at the moment. I think it's
or money that could be available.
There's 100 million about to be released. Well,
on condition of counterpart.
But they're going to release a little bit already. And then the counterpart there is outros 100 milhões do lado do Brasil.
Olha, eu não sei quantificar, né? Porque são cálculos que até mesmo pela desvalorização do dinheiro no Brasil ocorre a cada dia está aumentando, né? Eu não posso dizer quanto realmente é. Sei que é uma soma que não é tão pequena. A parte que cabe ao governo brasileiro, porque o Banco Mundial financiou todo o equipamento, senão não tinha jeito, né? Financiou todo o equipamento, por isso é que quase todo o equipamento está lá estocado. Há 1, 2, 3 anos, ainda hoje continua chegando material, mas talvez 90% ou mais está lá estocado. Então, a percentagem que cabe ao governo brasileiro é só para a montagem, as obras civis. Uma parte muito... O volume não é tão pequeno, mas relativamente o valor do projeto todo é uma parte muito pequena, porque parece que é 62% do governo brasileiro, parece que é. E o restante do Banco Mundial. Eu tenho alguma dúvida sobre isso, mas é mais ou menos isso aí. Então, não é um volume tão alto, levando em conta o valor do projeto todo.
porque só é essa percentagem para montagem, só as obras civis. Equipamento não entrou dinheiro nenhum do governo brasileiro.
We don't have a precise figure for what the counterpart funding should be. It's in relative terms, it's not that great, although the costs are going up all the time. But it's really just to pay for the actual construction works of installing the irrigation system. As you saw from the film, all the materials are there, paid for by the World Bank. It's something like 28% of the total costs of the project and what the Brazilian counterpart funding should be. Chosky yesterday said that to complete the project it would cost another $200 million. So I assume that they're thinking that that's their 100 million and 100 million from Brazilians. And if they keep working flat out with no interruption of the construction works, it'll take another year. So you're talking about 2 years before these people can even start.
But with proper supervision, couldn't the people help to install this equipment? Or is it something that's so specialized that you need a subcontract?
Eu posso explicar mais?
Não. A pergunta dele era se o povo mesmo, um pouco de treinamento, fiscalização dos técnicos, não poderiam eles finalizar ou ajudar na construção.
É interessante isso, né? Porque poderia haver ajuda para diminuir gastos. Isso é possível. Né? Agora...
E ocupar
Sim, o danado é que se vê no Brasil, o costume do brasileiro, né? É desviar tudo, é um horror de recursos para fazer uma pequena obra. Se tivesse seriedade, eu tenho certeza que havia muita colaboração. Mas mesmo assim, eu achei interessante se não tocar nisso aí, porque eu sempre pensei nisso. O trabalhador reassentado poderia trabalhar no próprio projeto, que era assim que a gente queria, quando a gente pensou, né, e foi aprovado com a parada da obra, a ajuda de manutenção temporária. A gente não dizia que era para o trabalhador receber sem fazer nada, era trabalhando, inclusive trabalhando na montagem do projeto, era assim que a gente queria. Como nunca foi montado, aí não pode, tem que receber sem fazer nada, porque não tem projeto sendo montado, né? E realmente poderia baratear se botasse o próprio povo reassentado para trabalhar no projeto, cavar valeta, já que a maioria da irrigação é fixa, vai cavar o chão e botar embaixo, né? Poderia diminuir.
So, yes, I mean, it might sort of Britannic sort of yeah, it would obviously be one way of reducing costs, and anyway, it was what we had proposed, and it had been our idea in the first place, was to help install the project. We didn't want to just be receiving a salary and doing nothing. We're workers, we wanted to get things moving along. But the truth is, there's been nothing to help sort of install, because no work's been going on.
Question. The bank still has $100 million of leverage left in this. Then why is Chesapeake so reluctant to go ahead with the works and get its $100 million in hard foreign exchange?
I have some ideas, but they probably have other interests.
Existe os 100 milhões do banco, e por que então não se coloca, a CHESF não coloca o restante, né? É claro, a CHESF, que produz energia, que deveria ter dinheiro, até dinheiro próprio, que vende muita energia. Só o que gera em Itaparica, vale muito dinheiro, né? Mas o que dizem é que vendem energia as empresas que vendem ao povo nos estados, e essas não estão pagando a Eletrobras, a própria CHESF, e a CHESF não tem recurso próprio. Segundo informação, a CHESF paga do recurso próprio essa ajuda de manutenção temporária que a gente está recebendo, mas do apurado que ela faz, não dá para entrar como contrapartida nacional. Isso terá que ser liberado pelo governo federal. Foi aprovado para esse ano, no orçamento da União, 62 milhões de dólares como contrapartida, que seria como a contrapartida nacional. Ontem o rapaz do banco falou que isso pela desvalorização que todo dia vai tendo, já seria insuficiente, né? Mas a dificuldade maior, toda a dificuldade atualmente, pelo que a gente sente, é exatamente a falta do dinheiro nacional. Tendo isso, automaticamente se acaba o problema, que o banco disse que é só esse o entrave, porque não passa os 100 milhões. Tendo a contrapartida, está tudo resolvido.
Vicente is saying that Chesney ought to have lots of money because it sells energy, power in the region. Itaparica itself generates a lot of power, but the truth of the matter is that the customers aren't paying their bills to Chesney, so it's unable to obtain the necessary revenue to put up the counterpart funds. And this is not only true of Chesney, but it's supposed to be true of Leda Rurais. But especially, we were told yesterday with the recent price hike in the energy sector, many of the regional power companies have been unable to collect their dues from their customers, so they've not been remitting any money to the central power company. However, the federal government in its budget forecast for this fiscal year had approved, in principle, $62 million for the counterpart funding for this project. But the World Bank yesterday said, well, that would be certainly insufficient to complete the project, especially in view of the devaluation that's going all the time in Brazil. So there's a problem that there's just not, the money isn't there. But I think there's a political aspect. I mean, you get a bit sort of obfuscated with all the economic reasons. Of course, there are genuine economic problems in Brazil, but there's also the political issue, and it seems as though the Brazilian government is allowed to implement those parts of the projects that fits its priorities, and the bits that are of less regards as being less important and less priority, like resettling poor peasant families, they can get away with not.
So the money is there, but it's just not a priority.
I think, yeah, there's money there, and it's not a priority.
Second,
Leda, sorry.
Não, só queria colocar o seguinte, é que a Chesney já até disse pra gente que a especialidade dela é gerar energia, né? E não irrigação. E depois, prioridade para ela não é Itaparica, que já está gerando energia, e sim Xingó.
Que é verdade.
Yeah, I mean, one of the, ridiculous things is that the power company is in charge of implementing a resettlement program. Obviously not the most, the obvious sort of people you would go to. And they've told Polo that their job is to generate electricity, which of course is true, and that it's not to lay on irrigation. And so if they have to make priority, they always go to when they, where they can generate more electricity, and that's why this other dam, Xingó, is their priority.
How many people are we talking about for range?
Some 6,000 to 7,000 families, and that's about.
In both stations?
Yeah.
Families?
That's families.
Família, né?
São mais de 50.
Só famílias de trabalhador rural afetado, reassentados, que teve alguns que tinham saído e que retornou. Reassentado tem 6.700 famílias de trabalhadores rurais, mas ainda tem as famílias das cidades, que era Petrolândia, tinha também parte rural, mas tem a cidade toda Petrolândia, Itacuruba pelo lado de Pernambuco, que inundou a sede todinha, Rodelas também a sede todinha, que foi inundada pelo lado da Bahia. Então,
Tem parte de Arrochão.
São quase 60 mil pessoas
Quase 60
de famílias
mil.
rurais, né?
Sim.
60
So, about 65 million rural families.
1,000.
I get calculation for Brazil. So there was some urban resettlement as well, but most of that went by quite smoothly. So there was about 175,000 people resettled altogether, but the rural labouring people who happened in this case.
The British executive director of the World Bank in 1985, when the first Brazil power sector loan was put up for approval. This was in June 1985. I don't know if you're aware that Oxfam, of course, was already lobbying on behalf of the people to be resettled from the Itaparica Dam. And if you don't already have it, we have a copy of the board minutes for that first power sector loan, $500 million that went to the Brazilian power sector, because the British executive director insisted that he could not approve the first power sector loan in 1985 unless there would be a specific provision in that loan agreement for the resettlement of the Itaparica oustees. And given that long history of the pressure and contact of the Oxfam and the British Executive Director's Office dating back to 1985, I was just wondering whether you were going to visit the British Executive Director, already have, and whether you were planning maybe to remind the ODA and the British ED's office of this long history of the British ED being on record in favor of this, to that some pressure could be exerted through that mechanism. What has happened?
Yeah, we had a meeting this morning with organised by the British ED's office, and met with the alternate Executive Director, Robert Graham Harrison, and we had representatives of most of the Part 1 ED's offices there, although the United States wasn't there, but I think that was just really was a kind of problem of time with the person involved. And they're taking a pretty tough line. And, we came away from that meeting feeling that they were going to put a lot more pressure on
Chelsea.
Yeah.
And what about the idea of the cross conditionality for this?
They were much more, well, there's not much happening in the power sector, that's what we were told.
Yeah. They were more open to this idea.
But the EDs, certainly the UK office, feel that enough's enough, that this has got to be resolved, and they're prepared to look at other pipeline projects that are coming up and say,
really? So they would agree with that?
I think they might well. Whether they can get other executive directors to agree to it. The Scandinavians were there, and because none of the people who attended the meeting said, why don't we write a letter to President now, which would be good. And the Scandinavians were reluctant about joining in. But I think that I felt that they were very sort of impressed with presenting Leda, and I think, the kind of, they've tried these people's patience for so long, they just keep on getting pushed to the bottom of the line. So I think there is quite a lot of room for manoeuvre there. I mean, the next big project is probably Flora.
For Rondonia or for?
Which is coming up in March. And that might well be, I think the UK's office thinks that that's an opportunity if things aren't moving along. Obviously, maybe groups that have done NGOs and other partners. But I think it would just gives a kind of salutary shock to the Brazilians that actually this is being taken seriously. Because I get the feeling with this project that the task managers and middle-ranking people do take it seriously, do raise it, but it doesn't go any higher than that in the bank's hierarchy.
And it has to stop somewhere, because of course, the whole history of World Bank lending to Brazil in the 1980s is such a scandal of broken loan agreements on the environmental settlement, protection of the indigenous peoples. I mean, this is just the last of numerous outrages. Unless the bank's loan agreements right now aren't worth the paper they're printed on.
Well, they said to us that in operations yesterday that all their projects, with all the projects they've got with that country.
What is the bank's participation in the Shingle project? None? How's that being financed?
Of course, the money is funded. There's the old fungibility argument that it goes into the black hole of electrograd, and who knows where it pops up again.
We're going to have to wrap up, I'm afraid. Thank you all very much for being here, and those who work in the area. It's clearly a concern that we can keep on helping out. But if you could get something to the US ED's office, do that.
Yeah, I think, well, we have this draft letter here, I guess.
Yeah, I mean...
Are you thinking of sending this to Preston? I mean, do you have a box, ma'am, or how do you...
Yeah, I mean, that went from Bernie's sent.
Well, we got it.
Vigorously. There are now stronger advocates within the bank, and Mohammed Al-Ashray, the head of the new environment department. Did you meet with him or not?
No.
But he is, as opposed to his predecessor, he is committed to taking on operations and taking on, you might say, the chokeskies of the bank, and they're really fighting. And I think this would be. I don't know how long you're going to be in.
We're all to around about Friday.
Well, it might be useful to try and see Mohammed Al-Ashray and point out the, this is a test case for resettlement, and it's a scandal that you've already seen with executive directors, and point out how your feelings of dissatisfaction with your meetings with Chelsea.
All right. Well, thanks for all coming. Keep you informed.
Ô Raquel, todos eles que se interessarem, vai deixar mais com você. As outras
traz para você.
Os outros aí.
Stay on a jar, but I just put that on the desk.